Good morning, everyone. It's time to go on the record.
It is up to the senators, both Democrats and Republicans, to do their job.
The battle lines are drawn. Bay State Democrat senators are urging action on the nomination of Harvard-educated Merrick Garland. Former Senator Mo Cowan is here this morning to discuss the D.C. standoff.
I don't think you can say that we don't get it automatically. I think you'd have riots.
The politics of fear, Republican Donald Trump revving up to secure his nomination in Cleveland or else. And to that point,
political rallies, disruptions, and the underlying threat of violence. Your thoughts?
The chances of that are a perfect zero.
And Steve Wynn minces no words when it comes to more money for Somerville and the city's lawsuit against his casino.
From WCPB Boston, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill, today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ed Harding, along with Johnny Wu, our political reporter here at News Center 5. Thank you for joining us on OTR this morning. Our guest is Mo Cowan. If that name sounds familiar to you, it's because for 6 months in 2013, he served as a United States Senator, replacing then Senator John Kerry when he headed to the State Department. Cowan, a Democrat, was appointed by his former boss, Governor Deval Patrick. He served as both the governor's legal counsel and chief of staff. He stepped down after Ed Markey won the Senate seat in a special election. He is now the Chief Operating Officer of ML Strategies. And let me ask you right off the front here, it is polite to give someone the highest office they held and the courtesy of that. Would you prefer to be referred to as Senator?
Well, you can call me Mo. The highest office I've ever held was Stacey Cowan's husband.
Now there's a smart
Stacey Cowan's husband. Great to have you with us this morning.
Good morning.
a man who obviously will stay married for a while. You're a U.S. Senator, as we pointed out, and as one of the key political leaders in the state, does a senator have an obligation to weigh in, like, for example, on presidential elections, especially like this one, which basically no one can take for granted?
Listen, I think everyone should weigh on the presidential elections. I have a view of endorsements, and my view is everyone should make their own endorsement. I haven't really endorsed anybody in this campaign. I am going to support the Democratic nominee. I've supported them in other ways. I think, for example, Hillary Clinton would make a fantastic president. I think she's probably one of the most qualified candidates we've seen in modern history.
But you know where my question is going. As Senator Elizabeth Warren has stayed out of the Democratic race so far. She's sort of making hints that she may be jumping in soon because she's not happy with the other side, Donald Trump. But does she have an obligation to let her constituents know where she stands on the Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, and why not?
I don't think she has an obligation, nor, for example, do I think that Governor Baker has an obligation on the other side. I think they should announce their support in whatever way they feel appropriate. I think Senator Warren has been very clear about the things she cares about, both from a policy perspective and in this campaign. And I also like elected officials who sort of step back and say, listen, let's let the people decide for themselves who they want to serve in this capacity. So you're not going to hear me pressure either Senator Warren or Governor Baker to sort of step out and endorse somebody. Let the people decide.
Speaking of that, let's get into the Senate responsibilities. And the question centers around Merrick Garland's nomination to the Supreme Court by the president. Should senators host him, entertain him, and interview him for the job, if you will, for lack of a better term? And B, should they vote on him, yes or no?
Yes and yes.
Before President Obama leaves office?
Absolutely. President Obama is the president until January 20, 2017. There's nothing in the Constitution that says there are certain of his powers that expire before that date. There is a vacancy on the court. He has done his constitutional duty. I would urge my colleagues, my former colleagues in the Senate, to do theirs. And as a minimum, as a courtesy, you have to meet with the nominee, and you should vote for him. Frankly, I'm surprised that they came out so early and just said categorically, neither will they meet nor they hold a vote on the nominee. I think that's going to hurt them in the long term.
But let's just say for the record that Senator Kelly out of New Hampshire has said that she will at least have the conversation.
I saw that.
So at least the door will open. So I want to make sure we put that in.
But the question, of course, is if the situation were reversed, okay, and you're looking at putting someone in a lifetime appointment that even in Merrick Garland's situation is at least 10, 15, 20 years minimum, how would you feel if a conservative Republican president wanted to put someone in the final days of their term?
If I were still serving and the situation was reversed, Janet, I would absolutely call for my colleagues on the Democratic side to hold a judiciary hearing for the nominee, to talk to the nominee, and to hold a vote. I think that's the job. It's part of the job. The people expect that. And you have to respect the office of the presidency and respect the Constitution. As the hashtag says, folks need to do their job.
That's a valid point, but let's drill down on what Janet talked about. Is because we are so close to November, is there merit in waiting to see who the next president is?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely
All right.
not.
So the voters shouldn't have a say as to
That's
who should
the point.
appoint the next judge, justice.
Absolutely, they should have a say, and they said it in November of 2012 when
That
they
was
said.
a long time ago.
Indeed, but not yet 4 years ago, and our presidential terms are for 4 years, and the people decided by a majority in November 2012 that Barack Obama was going to be endowed with all the powers of the office, including the power to appoint a Supreme Court justice in the event there was an opening, and we had the unfortunate passage of Justice Scalia. He has done his job, and the Senate should do theirs.
Let's talk about something that's more immediately in front of us, which is the Democratic race. Should Bernie Sanders, at this particular point, pull back, let Hillary Clinton claim the title of the nominee, and let her move on to the general election at this point?
No, I don't think so.
It's not time yet. Do you think there is a chance that Bernie Sanders could still win the nomination?
I think it's a very, very hard path for Senator Sanders to win the nomination, but I do not believe in disenfranchising voters in any way or shape or form. We have a nomination process. I'm from the Deval Patrick School of Primaries, which means primaries are a good thing. Let the candidates on either side raise their issues, bring them to the public and to the voters, have those opinions and issues be shaped by the voter reaction and opinion over time. They're going to shape each other. I think at the end of the day, all the candidates, whomever the nominee may be, certainly on the Democratic side, will be a stronger, better nominee as a result of the primary process. So you don't think
it'll hurt Hillary Clinton in the long run?
It may. It may. I think Senator Sanders is a very sophisticated campaigner. He has caught the attention and the passion of a lot of voters. He is challenging Secretary Clinton on some of the positions she took in the Senate, some of the things she did as Secretary of State. But the reality is she's going to have to address those in a general election if she's the nominee anyway.
Let's go there. Is Donald Trump Hillary Clinton's dream opponent?
I'm not sure Donald Trump is anyone's dream opponent. I think Donald Trump, and let me be clear about this, I'm not a political prognosticator, and if I ever were one, the Trump candidacy would have put me out of business, frankly, because I had been predicting for some time that this was a flash in the pan, but clearly he, and to a similar extent, Senator Sanders have tapped into a strain of frustration in the electorate. I do not care for the rhetoric that Donald Trump is spewing.
We're looking at the violence, too, that has been around his organization.
Frankly, that's an abomination. It's an embarrassment. I think all of us who care about the democratic process should be concerned that you have a major candidate who seems to condone this behavior and certainly doesn't condemn it when it's brought to his attention.
Could he be president of the United States?
He certainly could be if enough people vote for him, absolutely.
There you go. All right, you ready for the OTR pop quiz?
I'll do my best.
There you go. Stand by. Here we go. That's what everybody does. Just stand back, wait for the ball, and hit it hard. Question 1. During this election season, 5 current or former U.S. Republican senators have run for president. How many can you name? 5 former Republican, current or former Republican U.S. senators have run for president. Since you were a senator, we thought we'd go down that road.
Okay, here we go.
Ready?
Lindsey Graham.
Got it.
One of my favorite people. Rand Paul.
Got it.
Another Duke grad. Ted Cruz.
Got it.
Freshman senator. Marco Rubio.
Got it.
Oh man, I should know this 5th one.
Yeah.
Wow, this is
Pennsylvania.
Really?
He was a senator from Pennsylvania.
Ran a couple of times.
Of course, the only Pennsylvania senator I'm thinking of is Pat Toomey. He's up right now, and I know it's not Toomey.
Rick Santorum.
Rick.
Question 2.
Of course.
Out of 100 members, only 1 U.S. senator has endorsed the conservative Ted Cruz. Who is that?
That would be his fellow freshman senator, Mike Lee.
Mike Lee of Utah. Very good. We continue with Mo Cowan on the record. Stay with us.
Actually, you're doing pretty well.